Shabbat Shalom. I'm Cantor David Proser from Kempsville Conservative Synagogue, Kehillat Bet HaMidrash in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And this is our Torah portion for the Shabbat of Saturday, July 10th, 2021, corresponding to Rosh Chodesh Av, the first day of the month of Av in the year 5781 in the Hebrew calendar. We thank Rabbi Joseph Prauser, Rabbi Michael Gold, Rabbi Adam Rosenbaum, and the United Synagogue Torah Spark series for their various teachings and publications on this week's Parsha. This Shabbat, July 10th, we read the dual Parshiyot of Matot and Masei to complete the book of Bamidbar. Parshiyot Matot begins on page 941 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 702 of the Hertz. Parshiyot Matot begins with a discussion of vows, their binding nature, and their annulment under certain circumstances. A father may annul the vow of a minor daughter, and a man has a brief window of opportunity to annul his wife's vow, the day he learns of those commitments. A single adult woman, a widow, or a divorcee must stand by her vows. This section, giving husbands power over wives, was based on the concept of Shalom Bayit, peace in the home, but clearly it goes against contemporary ethical values. Moshe dispatches an army made up of all 12 tribes to attack the Midianites in retribution for their earlier idolatrous and moral corruption of the men of Israel. The Midianites, including 5 kings, and Balaam, son of Beor, the pagan prophet we learned about 2 weeks ago, are annihilated. The Israelites suffer no casualties. The victorious Israelites return with spoils of war. Midianite cities and encampments are burnt. Moshe becomes angry that the women were captured alive. It was the women, after all, who tempted Israel into sexual promiscuity. Moshe orders all males among the young Midianite captives and all but the virgins among the women put to death. This section of the Torah, with its large-scale slaughter of all the men and all the women who have had sexual relations, is one of the most difficult for moderns to fathom. Clearly, certain sections of the Torah must be studied in the context of their own time. In gratitude for the safe return of all Israelite fighting men, military officers bring Moshe an offering for God of the gold they had taken as booty. Moshe takes a census of the spoil and teaches the procedure for the purification of everything taken from the Midianites. The spoils of victory are distributed, half to those who fought, and the other half to the other Israelites, with a special share given to the Levites. Moshe and Eleazar accept the offering and bring it to the tent of meeting as a reminder to the Israelites of God's beneficence and a reminder to God of Israel's gratitude. The Parsha concludes with a crisis averted. The tribes of Gad and Reuven, later joined by half the tribe of Manasseh, ask Moshe to permit them to settle on the east side of the Jordan, where their cattle would have ample room to roam. Moshe at first understands this as a betrayal of the Israelite mission of conquest and settlement of the promised land, as well as an abdication of their tribal share of responsibility for Israel's military efforts. A compromise is reached. The tribes in question will be permitted to settle east of the Jordan, provided they serve as a vanguard in Israel's campaign of conquest. The 2.5 tribes agree to leave their cattle and children behind and join the other Israelites in conquering the land before returning to their families. Our second Parsha, Maaseh, starting on page 954 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 714 of the Hertz, begins with a lengthy detail of the Israelite travels through 40 years in the wilderness, beginning with Ramses in Egypt and concluding at the steppes of Moab, some 5 miles from the Jordan River. The next stage of this long journey is to cross the Jordan into the Promised Land. God commands Israel to expel the inhabitants of Canaan and to destroy the idols and places of worship they find there. Failure to do so will result in dire consequences. Additional instructions address allotment of the land among the tribes. Geographical features defining national frontiers are detailed. Both towns and pasture lands are to be provided for the Levites, who are not otherwise granted a tribal allotment. 48 such towns are to be designated, among them 6 cities of refuge. These cities provide asylum to Israelites who unintentionally take a life. Once such a person who has committed unintentional manslaughter enters a city of refuge, he is safe from relatives of his victim who might otherwise lawfully take the life of their loved one's killer. The perpetrator is given asylum until his lack of malice is established by trial. Should he leave the city of refuge, he is vulnerable to illicit vengeance. No monetary compensation is permitted to secure release of the unintentional killer. The manslayer can be released and is no longer liable to lawful vengeance only upon the death of the high priest. This, of course, is a period of unpredictable duration, dramatizing the vagaries of the human condition that led to the accidental killing. In addition to establishing the legal norm of trial and due process, Parshiyot Matot-Masei distinguished between unintended manslaughter and murder, which is established by the intent or malice aforethought of the perpetrator. The Parsha concludes by revisiting the precedent of the daughters of Zelophehad, through whom Israelite women were granted inheritance rights when a father left no male heirs. Clan leaders within the tribe of Manasseh now object that the sisters, as property owners, will diminish their tribal allotment by marrying members of other Israelite tribes. At God's instruction, Moshe rules such heiresses must marry only within their own tribes in order to safeguard the integrity of the tribal allotments within the land of Israel. The 5 sisters, accordingly, marry first cousins. Chazak, Chazak, v'nitz chazek, as we conclude the 4th book of the Torah, Bamidbar. This Shabbat is also Rosh Chodesh Av, the first day of the month of Av, also referred to as Menachem Av. Because of this, the Mafta reading from the Torah is the one for Rosh Chodesh, and not simply the last 3 Pesukim of the Parsha of the week. The reading is from the last part of Parshat Pinchas in the book of Bamidbar, chapter 28, verses 9 to 15, found beginning on page 930 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 695 of the Hertz. The reading describes the additional sacrifices that were to be brought on every Rosh Chodesh. The Haftorah for this Shabbat is from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 2, verses 4 to 28, and chapter 3, verse 4, beginning on page 973 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 725 of the Hertz. Just as last week, and just as next week, this Haftorah is not connected to today's Torah Parsha by theme. Rather, it was chosen as the second of 3 prophetic readings of admonition for the 3 weeks that precede Tisha B'Av. As we noted, a major liturgical shift began last week, initiating a period where the Haftorot relate thematically to our religious calendar, not to each weekly Torah reading. The choice of readings from Jeremiah is probably owing to the tradition that he was the author of the Book of Lamentations, which is read on the eve of Tisha B'Av. The main part of this Haftorah is an extensive indictment of widespread faithlessness, ingratitude, and apostasy addressed to the entire nation. The harsh judgment of the Haftorah is balanced by brief words of renewal and hope. The conclusion is a counterpoint to an accusation. Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to subscribe, to like, to hit the notification bell so you'll always know when we post new content. And please feel free to leave comments below. Thank you again for watching. Shabbat Shalom.